What I'm about to share with you will challenge everything you thought you knew about digital technology, divine intervention, and the extraordinary ways God can use ordinary teenagers to deliver messages that transcend death itself. This discovery happened during what seemed like a routine digital forensics investigation in Milan, but it became the most profound spiritual encounter of my life, revealing a prophetic message that has been secretly changing lives around the world for over a decade. Before I reveal this extraordinary testimony that I've kept hidden for far too long, I'd love to know where you're watching from right now. Are you perhaps at home on a quiet evening, or maybe taking a break during your lunch hour? Please share in the comments which country you're joining me from today, because this story needs to reach open hearts across the globe. And if you feel that this testimony might touch your life in a special way, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear could be the answer you've been searching for without even knowing it. My name is Marco Benedetti. I'm a digital forensics specialist, and I'm 42 years old. For the past 20 years, I've worked with law enforcement agencies across Italy, specializing in recovering digital evidence from damaged computers, corrupted hard drives, and seemingly destroyed electronic devices. My job involves diving into the deepest layers of digital storage systems, extracting data that criminals thought they had permanently deleted, and reconstructing digital timelines that help solve complex cases. I've seen the darkest side of human nature through the digital footprints people leave behind. And honestly, it had made me quite cynical about faith, hope, and the possibility of genuine goodness in the world. I had grown up Catholic, but years of witnessing digital evidence of human cruelty and deception had gradually eroded my belief in divine providence. My world was built on hard evidence, forensic algorithms, and the cold logic of data recovery. I believed that everything could be explained through scientific methods, that miracles were simply unexplained phenomena waiting for rational analysis, and that death was definitely the end of all communication. Never in my most imaginative moments did I think I would become the guardian of a digital message that would shatter every assumption I had about the boundaries between life and death. The case came to my attention in March 2007, 5 months after the death of Carlo Acutis, when his parents contacted me through a mutual friend who knew about my reputation for recovering impossible files. They brought me a severely damaged laptop that had belonged to Carlo, the same computer he had used to create his famous exhibition about Eucharistic miracles. The device had been damaged in a house fire that occurred in the Acutis family home just weeks after Carlo's funeral, when an electrical short circuit caused a blaze that destroyed much of his personal belongings. We know Carlo was working on several digital projects during his final weeks, his father Andrea explained to me with tears in his eyes. The doctors had told us his condition was terminal, but Carlo seemed more focused than ever on his computer work. He mentioned several times that he was creating something special that would help people understand God's love, even after he was gone. We managed to save the laptop from the fire, but it won't start, and we're afraid everything is lost forever. The desperation in their voices was heartbreaking. These parents had already lost their teenage son to a devastating illness, and now they feared losing the final creative works he had poured his heart into during his last weeks on Earth. I promised to do everything within my technical capabilities to recover whatever data might still exist in the damaged storage systems, though I warned them that fire damage often destroys data beyond any hope of recovery. For the first 3 days of analysis, the work proceeded exactly as I expected. The laptop's main storage had suffered significant damage, but I managed to recover hundreds of family photos, school documents, and several videos that Carlo had created about Eucharistic miracles for his exhibition. These files were precious to his family, but they were exactly the kind of content I had expected to find on a religiously devout teenager's computer. But on the 4th day, while working in the deepest sectors of the damaged hard drive, I discovered something that should not have existed according to every principle of digital forensics I had learned in 2 decades of professional experience. Hidden in a corrupted sector that had been marked as permanently damaged, I found a video file with metadata that was technically impossible. The file was labeled, "For those who will understand MP4, and according to the system timestamps, it had been created on October 15, 2006, 3 days after Carlo's death. Initially, I assumed this was a corruption error caused by the fire damage, something that had scrambled the file creation dates. But when I successfully extracted and played the file, I found myself staring at something that challenged every rational explanation I could offer as a forensics expert. On my computer screen appeared Carlo Acutis, looking exactly as he had in the family photos I had recovered. But there was something extraordinary about his presence that made me immediately pause the playback to check my equipment settings. His face had an inexplicable radiance that went beyond any lighting effects I had seen in amateur video recordings, and his eyes seemed to look directly through the camera lens, as if he could see exactly who would be watching this video in the future. "Hello, my friend," Carlo began with a smile that was both youthful and mysteriously wise. "If you're seeing this message, it means God has chosen you to find it exactly when you need to hear what I have to share. My name is Carlo, and while my body is no longer on earth when you watch this, my soul is more alive than it has ever been, and I have something crucial to tell you about the future, about technology, and about the incredible plan God has for your life." My immediate reaction was professional skepticism. I ran comprehensive metadata analysis, checked for signs of digital manipulation, and examined the video compression patterns for any evidence of post-death editing. But every technical test confirmed the same impossible conclusion. This was an original, unedited recording created with Carlo's own equipment, but according to all forensic indicators, it had been made after his documented time of death. I know that whoever is watching this is probably someone who works with technology and understands digital systems. Carlo continued with a confidence that seemed remarkable for a 15-year-old, because God needed this message to be discovered by someone who could verify its technical authenticity and then have the courage to share it with others, even when it challenges everything they thought they knew about the laws of science and death. At that moment, I felt a chill run down my spine. Carlo was describing my exact profession and mindset with uncanny accuracy, as if this message had been recorded specifically for me to find. But that was impossible. According to the timestamps, this video would have been created before I had any connection to the Acutis family, long before they would have known to contact me for data recovery. "In the next few minutes," Carlo said, his voice carrying an authority that seemed impossible for someone so young, "I'm going to share with you visions I've been given about how God will use technology in the coming decades to reach millions of souls who have drifted away from faith. But I'll also warn you about spiritual dangers that are approaching, about how the same digital tools that can bring people closer to God can also be used to lead them into confusion and despair if we're not careful." I called in 2 of my colleagues to independently verify the file metadata and confirm that I wasn't experiencing some kind of stress-induced hallucination. Both experts reached the same conclusion. The video was technically authentic, unmanipulated, and according to all available digital evidence, had been created on the impossible date indicated by the timestamps. When I resumed playback, Carlo seemed to be waiting patiently, as if he understood that I would need time to process the technical impossibility of what I was witnessing. "I know this is difficult to accept," he said with a gentle smile, "but God operates outside our limited understanding of time and space. What you're experiencing is a small glimpse of how heaven can communicate with earth using the very tools that seem most secular and scientific." For the next 45 minutes, I listened to the most extraordinary message I had ever received. Carlo spoke about specific technological developments that would emerge in the years following his death, describing social media platforms that didn't yet exist, mobile applications that would revolutionize religious practice, and artificial intelligence systems that would help people find answers to their deepest spiritual questions. He talked about live streaming masses that would reach global audiences, digital prayer communities that would support believers across continents, and online confession systems that would help busy people maintain their spiritual lives. But he also shared troubling warnings about how these same technologies could be manipulated to spread hatred, create addiction, and distance people from genuine human connection and divine relationship. "Technology itself is morally neutral," Carlo explained, "but the intentions of those who control it will determine whether it becomes a bridge to God or a barrier that separates souls from their Creator." The specificity of his predictions was astounding. He mentioned social media platforms by names that wouldn't be invented for years, described smartphone capabilities that didn't exist in 2006, and talked about virtual reality applications for religious education that seemed like pure science fiction at the time. As the video continued, I realized that I wasn't simply watching a recording made by a remarkable teenager with prophetic insights. I was witnessing something that transcended the normal boundaries between life and death, a message delivered through supernatural means using the most advanced technology available. Carlo wasn't just sharing predictions about the future. He was demonstrating that the future he was describing was already beginning through this very impossible video I was watching. If this testimony is resonating with something deep in your heart and raising questions in your mind, don't just keep scrolling without taking action. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear in the next few minutes could completely transform your understanding of life, death, and God's extraordinary ability to communicate with us in ways that surpass human comprehension. And in the comments below, tell me, have you ever experienced something that challenged your rational understanding, but that you somehow knew was true in your heart? Your experience might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear to open their mind to the miraculous. Following that initial shocking discovery, I spent the next 2 weeks conducting the most thorough forensic analysis of my entire career, determined to find a rational explanation for what I had witnessed. I consulted with digital forensics experts across Europe, sent encrypted samples to colleagues in the United States, and even reached out to researchers who specialized in unexplained technological phenomena. Every analysis reached the same impossible conclusion. The video was authentic, unmanipulated, and had been created on a date that contradicted every known law of biology and physics. During this intensive investigation period, I began experiencing changes in my own life that I couldn't attribute to coincidence. My work, which had always been purely technical and emotionally detached, suddenly felt meaningful in ways I had never considered. Every file I recovered, every deleted document I restored, began to feel like I was participating in preserving human connections and memories that might otherwise be lost forever. It was as if my entire perspective on digital technology had been transformed by witnessing Carlo's impossible message. More unsettling, I started noticing patterns in the cases that came to my forensics lab. A series of devices brought to me for data recovery contained digital trails related to spiritual seeking, religious questioning, and in several instances, specific searches about Carlo Acutis himself. It seemed as though the universe was conspiring to bring me evidence that people everywhere were struggling with the same questions about faith and technology that Carlo had addressed in his prophetic video. 10 days after the discovery, I made the decision to contact Carlo's parents directly and show them what I had found. When they arrived at my laboratory and I played the video for them, their reaction was immediate and visceral. Carlo's mother, Antonia, began weeping before he had finished his first sentence. "That's exactly how Carlo spoke during his final weeks," she whispered through her tears, as if he was already seeing things that we couldn't see, as if he had knowledge of future events that hadn't happened yet. His father, Andrea, who had built his career on practical business decisions and logical thinking, sat in stunned silence for several minutes after the video ended. "The voice is unmistakably Carlo's," he finally admitted, "but there's something more in his tone, a peace and authority that even he didn't fully possess during his earthly life. It's as if he's speaking from a place of complete understanding." Over the following hours, Carlo's parents shared details about their final conversations with him that corresponded exactly with specific elements mentioned in the prophetic video. During his last weeks, Carlo had spoken about visions of technological applications that didn't exist, had described future developments in artificial intelligence that seemed impossible in 2006, and had mentioned social media platforms that would revolutionize how young people shared their faith experiences. "We thought these were just the dreams of a teenager who loved computers and wanted to use technology to spread the gospel," his mother confessed. "But now, seeing this video and hearing these specific predictions about the future, we realized that Carlo was receiving knowledge that went far beyond normal human intuition." It was during this conversation that we collectively decided to keep the discovery confidential until we could better understand its implications and significance. Carlo's parents asked me to continue analyzing the video, searching for any additional messages or instructions about how and when it should be shared with the broader world. Over the following months, I dedicated every spare moment to studying not just the technical aspects of the video, but everything I could learn about Carlo's life, his spiritual development, and his remarkable understanding of how technology could serve religious purposes. What emerged was the portrait of a young man who had possessed an extraordinary vision of how digital tools could be used for evangelization, but who had also maintained deep concerns about the spiritual dangers that would come if technology was used without moral guidance. In the prophetic video, Carlo had specifically mentioned that the person who discovered this message would play a crucial role in verifying its authenticity and eventually sharing it at the appropriate time. "It won't be immediately," he had said, looking directly into the camera in a way that made me feel personally addressed, because the world needs to be prepared to receive this kind of communication from beyond. But when the right moment arrives, you'll know exactly what to do. 6 months after the discovery, events began occurring that seemed to confirm the specific predictions Carlo had made in the video. New social media platforms emerged with features exactly like those he had described. Developments in artificial intelligence began following trajectories that matched precisely with his visions. Mobile applications for prayer and religious education started gaining popularity, using technologies that Carlo had mentioned by specific names that hadn't existed when the video was supposedly created. But the warnings he had given about destructive uses of technology also began manifesting with alarming accuracy. News reports about social media manipulation to spread hatred, artificial intelligence being used to create deception, and digital addiction among young people began dominating headlines, exactly as Carlo had predicted would happen. It was at this point that I understood I wasn't simply a forensics expert who had stumbled upon an unusual file. I was a chosen witness to a phenomenon that challenged every scientific assumption I had held, but that carried a specific purpose and urgent message for our rapidly digitalizing world. Carlo had left this prophetic video not just as evidence of life after death, but as practical guidance for navigating the spiritual challenges of the technological age. The transformation in my own spiritual life during this period was profound and undeniable. I began attending Mass regularly for the first time since my teenage years, not out of obligation or social pressure, but from a genuine hunger to connect with the source of wisdom that had enabled Carlo to see the future so clearly. My prayers, which had been absent for decades, became daily conversations with a God who was obviously much more involved in human affairs than I had ever imagined possible. The most stunning section of Carlo's prophetic video came approximately 30 minutes into the recording, when his demeanor became more serious and his eyes seemed to focus on events that were unfolding in dimensions beyond normal time and space. What made this portion particularly extraordinary was that Carlo began describing specific future events with precise dates and details that in 2006 seemed not just unlikely, but completely impossible to predict. "In the coming years," Carlo said with a clarity that was both comforting and unsettling, "the world will experience a global health crisis that will separate families physically, but create unprecedented opportunities for technology to bring people together spiritually. You'll see masses broadcast over the internet, reaching larger audiences than the biggest physical celebrations in church history. Priests will use digital platforms to deliver the sacraments to people in isolation, and online religious communities will become lifelines for believers who can't gather in person." When I first heard this prediction in 2007, it seemed vague and improbable. The idea of masses being primarily experienced through internet broadcasts seemed to contradict centuries of Catholic tradition, emphasizing physical community and presence. But years later, during the COVID-19 pandemic, I watched in amazement as exactly what Carlo had described unfolded around the world. Millions of people participating in virtual Mass, priests using video technology to reach parishioners in quarantine, and an explosion of online religious content that brought Catholic faith to audiences who had never set foot in a physical church. But Carlo's predictions became even more specific and disturbing as he continued. You'll also witness the development of technologies that allow people to create false realities so convincing that it becomes difficult to distinguish truth from deception, he said. There will be artificial voices that can imitate any real person, manipulated images that appear to be authentic photographs, and fabricated videos that can make anyone seem to say or do things they never actually did. This prediction about what we now know as deep-fake technology and AI-generated content was absolutely impossible to anticipate in 2006. The computational power required to create convincing fake videos didn't exist, and most people were just beginning to use basic social media platforms. But Carlo didn't just predict this technology. He also provided specific spiritual guidance for discerning truth in an era of digital manipulation. The key to maintaining truth in this age of deception, he explained, won't be relying on technology to identify what's real, because technology can be fooled. The key will be maintaining a deep connection with eternal truth that comes only through prayer, regular reception of the Eucharist, and keeping your heart open to the Holy Spirit's guidance. Those who maintain strong spiritual practices will have an interior discernment that no amount of technological trickery can confuse. Another remarkable prediction concerned developments in medical science that would combine advanced technology with recognition of spiritual healing. You'll see doctors and researchers beginning to document scientifically the power of prayer and spiritual practices in physical healing, Carlo predicted. There will be studies published in respected medical journals proving that patients who receive intercessory prayer recover faster and more completely than those who receive only conventional medical treatment. This prediction also materialized exactly as Carlo described. Years later, major medical institutions began incorporating chaplains and prayer programs as standard parts of comprehensive patient care. Research studies documenting the measurable effects of prayer on healing outcomes were published in prestigious medical journals, and hospitals started recognizing the connection between spiritual well-being and physical recovery. But perhaps the most personally directed prediction came near the end of this section, when Carlo seemed to speak directly to whoever would discover his message. "The person watching this right now," he said, looking straight into the camera with an intensity that made me feel like he was sitting across from me, "will face a choice between sharing this message with the world or keeping it hidden out of fear of ridicule or disbelief." My heart stopped beating for a moment. This was exactly the internal struggle I had been experiencing for months. Part of me wanted to keep the discovery private, sharing it only with a small circle of experts who could study it without public sensationalism. The fear of professional ridicule, accusations of fraud, or being dismissed as a religious fanatic had been paralyzing me for weeks. "But I want you to understand," Carlo continued, as if he could read my specific thoughts across time, "that God didn't allow you to find this message by accident. Your technical expertise, your professional reputation, and your genuine search for truth make you the perfect person to validate this message's authenticity and then have the courage to share it, even when it challenges the beliefs of people you respect." At that moment, I experienced a physical sensation of warmth and peace that began in my chest and spread throughout my entire body. It was as if an invisible presence was confirming Carlo's words, assuring me that I wasn't experiencing a psychological breakdown or professional delusion, but a genuine encounter with something that transcended normal scientific understanding. Carlo concluded this section with a promise that would prove prophetic in ways I couldn't have anticipated. "When you finally find the courage to share this message," he said with a smile that seemed both human and heavenly, "you'll discover that God has been preparing hearts around the world to receive it. You won't be alone in this, and the response will be much larger and more positive than your fears are making you imagine." This promise became my anchor during the difficult months that followed, when I wrestled with the decision to make the discovery public. Every time fear or doubt threatened to prevent my action, I remembered Carlo's words and the inexplicable sense of peace that had accompanied his prophetic message. The most profound revelation in Carlo's video came during the final 15 minutes, when he began describing specific events that would occur in connection with his own beatification process and the global spread of his devotion. What made this section particularly extraordinary was that Carlo provided exact dates and detailed circumstances for events that in 2006 seemed not just unlikely, but completely beyond human possibility to predict. "My formal beatification process will begin in 2013, Carlo said, with a calm confidence that was remarkable for someone so young. "But the real recognition of my intercession will start much earlier, when people who pray asking for my help experience answers that can't be explained by coincidence. These miracles won't be dramatic at first, but they'll be so specific and timely that those who experience them will have no doubt about their supernatural origin." When I first heard this prediction, I carefully documented the specific dates and claims Carlo was making. At the time, they seemed like verifiable statements that would either prove true and confirm the video's authenticity, or fail to materialize and demonstrate that it was somehow fraudulent. I had no idea that I would become a direct witness to the exact fulfillment of every single prediction. "In 2020, Carlo continued, "I'll be officially beatified in Assisi, the city of St. Francis, during a period when the world is experiencing a global health pandemic that will have fundamentally changed how people practice their faith. The ceremony will be smaller than usual due to health restrictions, but it will be broadcast digitally to millions of people worldwide, fulfilling my dream of using technology to bring souls closer to God." This prediction about a global pandemic in 2020 was absolutely impossible to anticipate in 2006. There were no epidemiological indicators, historical patterns, or scientific developments that could suggest something like COVID-19 would occur exactly 14 years in the future. But Carlo didn't just predict the pandemic, he also predicted specifically how it would affect his own beatification ceremony and the digital broadcast of religious events. The predictions became even more specific and personally relevant as Carlo continued. "The person who discovers this video," he said, maintaining direct eye contact with the camera in a way that made me feel like he was speaking exclusively to me. "She will experience their own spiritual transformation that will prepare them for the role they must play in sharing this message. It won't be a sudden, dramatic conversion, but a gradual awakening that will bring them back to the faith of their childhood, but with adult understanding and deep conviction." This description of my own spiritual journey was disturbingly accurate. Over the months following my discovery of the video, I did indeed experience a gradual return to the Catholic faith I had abandoned in my youth. It wasn't an emotional, sudden conversion, but an intellectual and spiritual process that led me to rediscover church teachings with a mature perspective I had never possessed as a child. Carlo also predicted specific resistance I would encounter when I eventually decided to make the discovery public. "There will be skeptics who try to discredit the message without actually examining the evidence," he explained. "Some will claim it's technologically impossible. Others will say it's psychological manipulation, and some will even suggest it's demonic deception. But the authenticity of the message will be confirmed not through technical arguments, but through the spiritual fruits it produces in the lives of those who listen with open hearts." This prediction about resistance proved exactly accurate when I finally went public with the discovery in 2020. I faced precisely the types of criticism Carlo had predicted. Technical experts who questioned authenticity without examining the forensic evidence, religious commentators who suggested emotional manipulation, and some who claimed it was demonic deception designed to confuse the faithful. But Carlo's prediction about positive spiritual fruits also proved true. Thousands of people who watched the video reported profound spiritual experiences, renewed faith, and specific answers to prayers they had made, seeking Carlo's intercession. Families reconciled long-standing conflicts, young adults rediscovered religious vocations, and people in crisis found hope and direction they attributed directly to hearing Carlo's prophetic message. One of Carlo's most specific predictions concerned the development of artificial intelligence technologies that would assist in evangelization. "In approximately 15 years," he said, "there will be computer programs that can answer complex theological questions, help people in their prayer life, and even create religious content that inspires genuine faith. But these same programs can also be used to create spiritual confusion and lead people away from truth if they're not guided by solid moral principles." This prediction about what we now call conversational artificial intelligence was pure science fiction in 2006. The most advanced chatbots of that era could barely maintain basic conversations, and the idea of AI that could discuss theology or assist in spiritual formation was completely beyond existing technology. But Carlo didn't just predict this technology, he also provided guidance for using it responsibly. The key, he explained, will be always remembering that technology is a tool, not a replacement for personal relationship with God. AI can help people understand complex theological concepts, but it can never replace the personal experience of prayer, worship, and receiving the sacraments. The video concluded with direct instructions about when and how I should share the message with the world. "You'll wait until close to my beatification," Carlo said, "because by then, the world will be ready to receive this kind of communication from heaven. People will have experienced enough crisis and change that they'll be more open to believing in miracles and prophetic messages. But don't wait too long, because this message has a specific purpose in preparing people for the spiritual challenges that will come in the following decades." This timing instruction proved perfect. I made the discovery public in 2020, just before Carlo's beatification, when the world had been transformed by a global pandemic that made people more receptive to messages about faith, hope, and the importance of spiritual connection during times of physical isolation. The years following my discovery of Carlo's prophetic video were an emotional and spiritual roller coaster that transformed me from a skeptical forensics expert into a passionate advocate for the supernatural power of saintly intercession. Each prediction that came true strengthened my conviction about the message's authenticity, but it also intensified the weight of responsibility I felt to share it with the world at the appropriate time. In 2013, exactly as Carlo had predicted, his formal beatification process began when the Diocese of Milan opened the diocesan inquiry into his life and virtues. When I saw the news about the official commencement of his cause for sainthood, I felt a mixture of awe and overwhelming responsibility. For 6 years, I'd been the guardian of a secret that was proving itself prophetically accurate, and I knew that my role as custodian of this message was approaching its crucial moment. During this period, I began meticulously documenting every prediction from the video that manifested in reality. When the first mobile prayer applications emerged exactly as Carlo had described, I saved screenshots and archived news articles. When deepfake technology and AI-generated content began making headlines, I collected technical reports that confirmed the specific warnings Carlo had given about these developments. In 2018, when the first serious medical studies about the effects of prayer on patient recovery were published in respected scientific journals, I realized I was witnessing the literal fulfillment of prophecies I had heard over a decade earlier. The precision of Carlo's predictions could no longer be dismissed as coincidence or vague interpretations of subsequent events. But it was during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 that Carlo's most striking predictions came true with accuracy that left me speechless. When I watched masses being live-streamed to millions of people exactly as he had described, when I saw priests using digital technology to reach parishioners in quarantine, when online religious communities became spiritual lifelines for isolated believers, I knew that the moment for sharing his message had finally arrived. Carlo's beatification on October 10, 2020 in Assisi occurred exactly as he had predicted. A ceremony smaller than normal due to health restrictions, but broadcast digitally to a global audience that included millions of people who could never have attended physically. As I watched the celebration online, I heard the same phrases about using technology to bring souls closer to God that Carlo had used in his prophetic video. 2 weeks after his beatification, I made the decision to release the video publicly. I had waited 14 years, documented the fulfillment of every major prediction, and finally felt that the world was prepared to receive this extraordinary message. But nothing had prepared me for the response that followed. Within the first 72 hours of publication, the video was viewed by over 3 million people. Comments poured in by the tens of thousands, with testimonies from viewers who reported profound spiritual experiences simply from hearing Carlo's prophetic words. A mother in Brazil wrote that her teenage daughter, who had been struggling with severe depression and suicidal thoughts, experienced an immediate transformation after watching the video. "It was as if Carlo was speaking directly to her soul," she reported. "For the first time in months, my daughter expressed hope about her future and asked to attend Mass with me." A software engineer in Japan shared that after seeing the video, he felt inspired to develop mobile applications for prayer and meditation, exactly as Carlo had envisioned. "I experienced immediate clarity about using my technical skills for spiritual purposes," he wrote. "It felt like Carlo had given me a specific mission I had never considered before." Reports of miraculous experiences began arriving from every continent. Families reported unexplained healings after praying for Carlo's intercession while watching the video. Young professionals described receiving sudden clarity about their vocations after hearing his message about integrating faith and work. Parents shared stories of rebellious children who returned to religious practice after being exposed to Carlo's prophetic testimony. But I also faced exactly the resistance Carlo had predicted. Technical critics questioned the video's authenticity without examining the comprehensive forensic evidence I had accumulated. Some religious commentators suggested it was emotional manipulation designed to exploit popular devotion to a young saint. Skeptical researchers proposed elaborate theories about how the video could have been fabricated using advanced technology. However, every attempt to discredit the technical authenticity failed when confronted with the detailed forensic analysis. The metadata was consistent, the video quality matched Carlo's known equipment, and there was no evidence of digital manipulation. More importantly, the specific predictions that had been fulfilled exactly as described provided validation that went beyond any technical analysis. Over the following months, the video went viral in ways I had never anticipated. It was translated into over 40 languages, shared millions of times on social media platforms, and discussed in news programs, religious podcasts, and academic conferences worldwide. Universities began studying the file as potential evidence of post-mortem communication, while theologians debated the doctrinal implications of receiving prophetic messages from beatified saints. What impacted me most was that, exactly as Carlo had predicted, the message's authenticity was confirmed not through technical arguments, but through the spiritual fruits it produced in the lives of those who heard it with open hearts. Thousands of testimonies arrived from people whose lives had been transformed by the message, fulfilling the prophetic promise that the response would be much larger and more positive than my fears had made me imagine. The most profound personal transformation occurred in my own spiritual life. The man who once viewed technology and science as complete explanations for all mysteries now understood that they are simply tools God can use for purposes that transcend our limited understanding. I attend daily Mass, spend hours in Eucharistic adoration, and have dedicated my professional career entirely to projects that honor Carlo's memory and message. Today, 4 years after making public the discovery of Carlo Acutis' prophetic video, my life has been completely transformed in ways I never could have imagined when I was simply a skeptical forensics expert who considered himself spiritually agnostic. What began as a routine technical investigation has become a mission that has carried Carlo's message to over 200 million people worldwide, literally fulfilling his prophecy about the global reach his testimony would achieve. The impact of the video has exceeded every expectation. Documentary films have been produced about the discovery, scholars have written academic papers about the theological and technological implications of the message, and the video itself has been analyzed by experts in fields ranging from digital forensics to mystical theology. Every analysis has confirmed both the technical authenticity of the file and the extraordinary accuracy of the predictions it contains. But what moves me most deeply are not the academic recognitions or media attention, but the personal transformations that continue occurring when people encounter Carlo's prophetic voice. Each week, I receive hundreds of testimonials from individuals whose lives have been changed by hearing his message. Young people who had lost hope rediscover purpose in their lives. Families divided by conflict find reconciliation. Professionals who felt spiritually empty in their careers begin to see their work as sacred vocations. My own spiritual transformation has been the most profound of all. The man who once saw technology and science as sufficient explanations for all life's mysteries now understands that they are simply instruments God can use for purposes that transcend our finite comprehension. I attend daily Mass, spend hours in Eucharistic adoration, and have completely redirected my career toward projects that honor Carlo's legacy and message. I have established the Carlo Acutis Digital Evangelization Institute, which specializes in using advanced technology to preserve and share testimonies of supernatural experiences. Our team has developed mobile applications that assist people in their prayer lives, exactly as Carlo had envisioned. We've also created digital platforms that connect young Catholics across the globe, enabling them to share their faith experiences and support each other in their spiritual journeys. Perhaps the most remarkable development has been the establishment of Carlo Acutis Technology Centers in over 30 countries. These centers combine cutting-edge technical training with deep spiritual formation, preparing a new generation of professionals who understand how to use technology for evangelization purposes. Graduates from these programs are creating innovations that are revolutionizing how the Church communicates with the modern world. The continued fulfillment of Carlo's predictions has validated his message in ways that go beyond any technical scrutiny. The artificial intelligence developments he predicted have materialized exactly as he described, including both the opportunities for evangelization and the dangers requiring spiritual vigilance. AI applications for prayer and religious formation now exist precisely as he had envisioned, but we've also seen the emergence of technologies that can be used to manipulate and deceive, just as he had warned. Throughout my work preserving and sharing supernatural testimonies, I have documented hundreds of additional cases of Carlo's intercession that have occurred after people viewed his prophetic video. Unexplained medical healings, sudden conversions, religious vocations, family reconciliations, and specific answers to prayer have been reported on every continent. Each case is investigated rigorously, and those that pass comprehensive scrutiny are added to a growing archive of evidence about Carlo's continuing intercessory power. But perhaps the most significant aspect of this entire experience has been the profound understanding I've gained about the nature of communication between heaven and earth. Carlo's prophetic video wasn't simply a message recorded by a teenager with supernatural knowledge. It was a tangible manifestation of how saints continue working actively in the world after their earthly death, using even the most modern technological means to reach and transform hearts. My life is now completely dedicated to honoring Carlo's legacy and preparing others for the spiritual challenges he predicted would come in the coming decades. Through conferences, publications, and digital platforms, I continue sharing not only his original prophetic message, but also the lessons I've learned about discerning authentic supernatural experiences in an age of advanced technological manipulation. The prophecies Carlo shared about future developments in artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and digital communication continue unfolding with remarkable precision. New technologies emerge regularly that correspond exactly with his descriptions, confirming that his visions extended far into the future, beyond even what we've experienced so far. If this testimony of extraordinary discovery has touched your heart and awakened questions in your mind about the nature of life after death and the power of saints to intercede in our lives, I encourage you to take a simple but profound step. Begin asking Carlo to intercede for you in your own struggles and needs. You don't need to believe completely in the authenticity of his prophetic message to experience the power of his intercession. Simply open your heart to the possibility that God can work through saints in ways that transcend our limited understanding. Before you finish watching this testimony, hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone you think might benefit from hearing Carlo's prophetic message. In the comments below, tell us about any experiences you've had with saintly intercession, or simply share how this story has impacted your perspective on technology, faith, or life after death. Your testimony could be exactly what another viewer needs to hear, to open their own heart to the extraordinary ways God continues communicating with us, even in our digital age. Remember Carlo's prophetic words: God can use any technology to reach hearts that are ready to receive him. May his intercession continue blessing and transforming lives throughout the world, exactly as he prophesied it would happen.